What's up, guys? Just a quick video on the B450m Mortar Max that I've been running, for my 5600X setup. And I'm on Agesa 1.2.0.7, and as some of you may know, since I think 1.2.0.5, there have been issues with boost clocks and PBO not working properly and voltages being low for non-X3D CPUs. So basically all the CPUs that aren't the 5800X3D, and that's been documented and posted about on all over Reddit. And basically I stayed on 1.2.0.7 because my all-core performance is still fine. I run like a all-core negative curve. I've tried using Core Cycler, well, not Core Cycler, I tried using Thread Stepper, which is similar to Core Cycler, but it works in Windows 11. And my all-core performance is fine, which is the most relevant to the majority of games I play. All the games I play use 4 or more threads, and it's boosting to 4.65 gigahertz just fine. There's no clock stretching in Cinebench Multi, but on Cinebench Single, I'm only getting around 580 at best, while on Agesa, on older Agesas or on older builds of Windows 11, I was getting 600 points on Single, and now I'm only getting about 580 at the exact same settings. Even adding to the PBO frequency does not help me get up to 620 like I've seen some people with just a mild PBO overclock. They're getting 620. So I'm thinking there could be slight Agesa issue, but also Windows 11's latest build, whatever like I'm on the latest build, but the latest build version and the past few have all had lower single core performance for me. And my OS is basically stripped down. There's a couple of background apps, but if I disable everything, I still can't get the scores up where they should be. So I made this video because I'm actually going to update now. MSI has just released Agesa 1.2.0.7 through their Google Drive. It's not on the support pages yet for the majority of their boards. They haven't updated 1.2.0.7 even on the X570, but it's on their Google Drive, and it is a beta. But as far as betas are concerned, 1.2.0.6c is still a beta, so it's not going to hurt. Hopefully. To just go from 1.2.0.6c to 1.2.0.7 with the hopes of maybe the boost clock will improve a little bit on single, and it's not really needed. My RAM's running good, 3600 megahertz. It gets about 58 ns in IDA 64 on a good day, depending on background processes, because I do still have certain things that can affect latency, like superfetch enabled. That's just enabled by default, and I upgraded to 32 gig RAM, so it's not really an issue to have a bit more, apps cached, things like that. So anyway, what I've done, I'm borrowing my wife's phone, and I've taken screenshots of all my BIOS. This is what I normally do when I update the BIOS, is I take screenshots of all these settings that I can't memorize. Actually, I can memorize most of it, but mainly the RAM tuning tabs. And then I try to get it to all work. Try to get the settings to see if the next BIOS can run stable with the exact same settings, and if there's any voltage changes, which I've shared before, between most BIOSes, it's been 1-to-1, except until 1.2.0.5, I noticed the voltage capping under load. But in terms of idle voltages and minimum voltages, like BIOS voltage, for example, what I've set tends to be the same across multiple BIOS updates. So it's been very stable in that sense, but under load in Windows, it's been a bit different. With the latest 2 BIOS updates. So if I can just figure out, one of these should give me auto rotate. I don't know why she's taken, oh no, there it is, lock orientation, because I need to be able to see what I'm doing. She's got some guitar tutorial stuff here. Okay. So basically I took screenshots of, my CPU overclocking tab, PCI system subsettings, voltages, and there's all the memory individual timings I have set, because this is the only way I can get it stable at a good latency. So this is like C19, and then normally I was getting about 62, 63, or 65 ns is the default XMP latency, and this got it down to about 58, 59 ns. So 59 is like the worst latency it's got in ADA 64, but at the same time, it's Windows 11. Windows 11 just scores bad in latency benchmarks, even in L3 cache. It's 1 ns higher than Windows 10. I don't know. It seems to perform fine for gaming, so I guess that's not a big deal. So yeah, anyway, we're going to go ahead with the BIOS update. I've already got it on a USB. Enter flash mode, so you just go to M flash there. Make sure you press F7, for those of you who haven't done BIOS updates much, or you're curious about it and you want to learn, just make sure you know how to clear CMOS. That's the only thing. Worst case scenario, you tap the CMOS jumper with a screwdriver with the power supply turned off at the back, and it'll clear it, and you can just try again if you have any issues or flashing back. So I do keep a copy of the previous BIOS on my USB stick just in case. So this one here should be my USB. And let's see, yeah, I did shift it over. So there it is. That is the 1.2.0.7c BIOS. Its BIOS name is E7B89AMS.2G1. And that was in their Google Drive. I'm hoping it's got a different name, but you know, as you can see here, the E7B89AMS is the important part to know to your board. And then the 2F1 is the, I guess, the Agesa or the BIOS code. I don't know. But if I go to like 203C, it's 2E3. So that's 203C. And then 206C is 2F1. And then, you know, 2G1, whatever that means. So we're just going to try flashing it now and pray, basically. But it does seem to be compatible. It's coming up. Version 2F1 to 2G1, and the build date 13th of May. I actually had this sooner, but they didn't upload it. Maybe they were just testing it internally to make sure that it's, you know, not gonna brick any systems. And yes. And there's my build. It's in a Rakk Haliya AK620 cooler that I upgraded to. I didn't really do a video. I've got the footage of me installing the cooler, but I never got around to editing it yet. Just family life. And I've finally had a quiet evening that I can, you know, do something like this and record it. The kids are being semi-okay right now. Still naughty, but whatever. And Arctic F12 sample Arctics. Fantex at the top and an Arctic at the back, and then just a Deepcool. Just see if my dust filter is getting dirty. Actually, this is a $50 case, and it has better features than $200 cases. I added these ultrafine dust filters, but the fact that you can just remove the front mesh and it's on a magnet and a hinge, so it hinges at the bottom to access the front fans. This is a feature that like all cases should have. And it still hasn't become like mainstream, but a $50 case in Philippines has it. It's crazy. And so, see, it just clips in at the bottom, okay? And then there's magnets here, like in the plastic, somewhere here, that clips on like that. And it's strong, like it's not gonna fall off. See, I have to actually pull it with a bit of force here. There, oh, I wanted to go back. The magnet's pretty good. But as you can see, how easy is that? I can literally take this off, wash the whole mesh, pop out my magnetic ultrafine. These are Silverstone dust filters, and you know, I can, a bit harder with one hand, but I can get these off and yeah, wash them. They're not that dusty actually, thankfully. I washed them not that long ago, but it is a bit overkill for the dust filtration. But at the same time, I do get a bit of dust coming in through the windows in the lounge. We've got like a truck depot not too far from us. So there we go. Sorry, my family came in. The BIOS update is finished, so it should automatically reboot, and we'll see if it posts with 4 sticks. So spam delete. Should post. I mean, it would just reset the 4 sticks to whatever default is. Like that's how I was able to configure them in the first place. But updating an MSI BIOS clears all the settings. It resets it to defaults. So it looks like it's going to take a couple of goes though. Like it's actually doing some memory attempt changes. But as soon as I see the keyboard light up, which normally it's dark on boot up, when I see that light up, then I know that it's working, that it figured out how to run the 4 sticks. And now we're back at all the default. Everything's has to be reconfigured. So I'll hit F7. This is the better mode, like the best mode to work with, because the easy mode is confusing. I mean, I don't understand how this is easier. Like, it's got switches, but all the settings are like hidden. If I go to CPU and press enter, it doesn't do anything. So I mean, it's a simple mode, but you can just look at the very basic, you know, what the RAM's defaulted to. 3600 1822 is the XMP for dual channel, not for having 4 sticks in dual rank configuration. So with 4 sticks, you actually need to manually configure the XMP, because the XMP profile does not, it's not for 4 sticks dual channel. So anyway, yeah, this is, I don't know, I don't understand, like, easy mode, basic mode, whatever. So I'll go in here and then I'll start with the settings tab, advanced, PCIe subsystem settings. We want resizable bar, and that automatically puts above 4G for crypto mining, but resizable bar for SAM. And then the PCIe, which Gen 3 on the main PCIe slot. I force that to Gen 3 for RDNA cards. It tends to avoid some black screening issues. Everything else is basically fine to leave as is. And then ACPI, power LED, do I want it blinking? Yeah, whatever, that's fine. Integrated peripherals, VGA detection, everything looks fine there. USB, yeah, default enabled. You don't need to mess with that. ERP ready, that's fine. Default. Secure boot. PK, did I even have this enabled? I'm pretty sure I just disabled secure boot. Like, I don't think it needs to be on. Whatever. Disabled. And I think that was actually where you put the TPM settings in under secure boot. So you can enable it and secure boot mode. No, that's not it. Let's just leave secure boot off. GOP. It's under security, sorry. So yeah, security is where you put in somewhere here, fTPM. And this is supposed to be what Agesa 1.2.0.7 fixed the TPM stutter. But Windows 11, once you've got it installed and it's actually bootable, you can actually just disable TPM if you don't want it, like that, and just have it off if you just don't want to deal with TPM and Windows, although it is recommended to have it on just because, you know, security. So it's up to you what you want to do with it. Because this is supposed to be fixed, I've seen what the stutter looks like, and it will even stutter the audio, and I never experienced it on my setup, even when it was enabled on the previous Agesas 205 and 06C. So this time, I did have it disabled just most recently, just because, but because 1.2.0.7 is meant to have it fixed, I might as well just leave it enabled and see how it goes. Storage hierarchy, I hope these platform and storage hierarchies don't mess with anything. Like, I don't remember setting them in previous BIOSes. I can actually just check. I think I took a screenshot on that page. See, I'm just going to see if I can find it. Security, DRAM. So I'm swiping just to the left of the screen, but if I find it, I'll bring it up. Security, UKey. Oh, I didn't go into the Trusted Computing tab. I just showed that it was disabled under the... I had it disabled, so I can't remember if they had the hierarchy options here where you could just turn off platform hierarchy. It's a bit weird. You can have TPM enabled, but you can also choose to disable certain functions, I guess, of TPM. Endorsement hierarchy. Like, what is that? There's like, it just enables or disables that. Really? That's all the description I get? Does it, ASUS, does anyone with another board, like, can tell me more, like, an actual description, not just like the obvious. Enabled or disabled is what it does. Yeah, I know. That's annoying. So, you know, if it annoys me, I might just leave it disabled. Whatever. I'm not testing that specifically. I want to actually test how the BIOS performs in terms of my single core boost. That's the only reason I'm updating, is just to see if the single core Signbench and CPU-Z performance improves or not. But I don't need that performance at all. Okay, so OC mode. Wait, I didn't fix the boot order under boot. Full screen logo. That's, you want that splash screen for your, you know, MSI splash screen. I don't like it. I just want to see like the DOS screen. And then my NVMe for boot up, and disable all the unnecessary devices. Probably doesn't make a difference with modern motherboards, but it looks cleaner that way. Boot manager is for the right drive. That's for my USB stick that's still plugged in. I can unplug that. Okay, so now in here, advanced CPU configuration, it's all been reset. SVM mode, that's for virtualization. I don't really need that. How did I have it set? Let's see here. Took photos of the wrong pages first. Advanced CPU configuration, I had SVM and NX enabled. I guess there was BlueStacks or something that used it, so I just figured why not. It doesn't hurt. And then auto disabled. Spread spectrum was disabled for more stability. The CPU doesn't fluctuate as much on the clock. Okay, and this phone, I need to lock it to landscape. Sorry, it's being super annoying. Lock orientation. Okay. So then we go into the CPU AMD CBS tab, and I had auto disabled, auto disabled. So I think I disabled IMOU. I don't know. Like I read that it wasn't necessary, and I did test with it on and off. Didn't seem to make a difference. This stuff is you can disable the C state control and certain settings here that it can help with benchmarking, and you know, but it wastes a bit more power, and in real world you shouldn't need to disable the power states to get good performance for a gaming system anyway. And then here we go. This is with my PBO settings. So I was using, for good temps and no clock stretching, at stock frequency, stock boost frequency, so 4.65 gigahertz all core. I was using these limits. It does slightly power limit throttle, but it doesn't clock stretch with these settings. Like unlocking them increases the temps by about 5 degrees, and the Signbench scores are virtually the same. So it's not worth it to like gain, even if you gain 20 points, if you're gaining 5 degrees because of that. So yeah, 105, 70, 110. So precision, boost, overdrive, auto, I think could be motherboard. I'm not sure. Disabled is default limits, or basically the normal power limits without PBO. And then enabled doesn't really say. I'm guessing enabled would be motherboard, because there is no motherboard option here anymore. I don't see it. And then there's all these enhanced modes which don't seem to have any description at all. So great to have enhanced modes with no no information. So anyway, advanced mode, PBO limits, and here's the motherboard one. Under advanced mode, you can set it to motherboard limits. But I go manual, and then 105, 70, 110 is what I like for my 5600X. 70, 110. PBO scaler, you can leave it on auto. It should just default to 1x. If you're like OCD about it, set it to 1x for default. It basically affects the default boost durations beyond what the chip is specified to run at. So it can be fine if you have good cooling and you're using these limits and you're not overclocking heavily, especially if you're curve optimizing, so you're already running at a lower than normal voltage. it can be perfectly fine to set the scaler like AMD have set it in literal guides. They said you can max it out. You can set it to like 10 because it's not going to be temperature or power limit throttling at a high temperature or a high voltage when you've undervolted it, when you've set the PBO curve to a negative and you've limited the PBO limit. You're not running uncapped. But if you're running uncapped, then it can add voltage to your uncapped voltage, which your uncapped power limits, and you can end up with really high voltage spikes. That's what you want to avoid. So in terms of, do you need it? If you're benchmarking and you're trying to hit benchmark top 5, you know, you're trying to win benchmarks for whatever it is, 3D Mark or any other CPU benchmarks, then it can be worthwhile. But for me, in a realistic scenario, for most gaming purposes, games do not peg your CPU to 100%. It's not going to happen. So apart from running those few benchmarks, there's no need to run it at 10x. You can just leave it on auto and leave it alone. So boost clock override negative, and this is stable on my system. Wait, not boost clock override, sorry, that's for frequency. Curve optimizer, this is stable on my system, and I know there's going to be people saying that it's not, and stress test it with Prime or something like that and run Prime overnight. But 29 has been rock stable for all purposes I use my system for. And I've also done Thread Stepper, which is like Windows 11 compatible core cycler, and it passed fine. So yeah, minus 29. And then what are these other settings here? We've actually got, do we have extra settings? They've moved stuff? Or they haven't? No, it looks about the same. There's an LN mode 2. Did this have LN mode 2? Yeah, so I had auto disabled on the LN2 mode. Numa nodes is left alone. LCLK frequency control. Ooh, that is new. So allows you to manually set the LCLK frequency. What do we have here? Minimum. You can actually set it. And the max range is 2500 megahertz. But I'm pretty sure that gets doubled or tripled. But if you've got it on, if you don't want it to mess with your PCI Gen, because this actually, it's like power saving for PCI peripherals and stuff. And if you're not running Gen 4, like you've got a Gen 4 GPU and you set it to Gen 4, I mean, you set it to auto, I can imagine that the PCI and the Gen 4 compatibility and being on a Gen 3 board may have some kind of, it may lead to more instability. So I've always kept it disabled in previous, but you can leave the normal LCLK enabled. That lets it dynamically adjust the frequency, and you'll see that in hardware info. So that's fine to leave alone, and I won't touch the default's auto. I'll just leave the frequency control alone. It's just like an extra option, I guess, maybe for overclocking if you're doing something specific. So everything else looks good. AMD CBS. I have CPPC disabled, and it looks like it was, I don't remember. I think I just disabled it before. But I just kept CPPC disabled because I tried testing on and off and it gave no benefit. But CPPC fully disabled seemed to stabilize performance and the way threads will jump around under load. Like the load was shifting between cores more often, and that was causing latency and lowering my multi-scores. So I just leave it off now because it lets Windows do what it wants, and as long as you don't have any per core instability, if all your cores are fine running at the max clock speed, it's not going to matter. Rather than when I had CPPC and preferred both on, what I noticed is my preferred core is 3. According to the Windows Power, you know, it calibrates and finds which are your best cores, and that syncs up with Ryzen Master and Hardware Info. They all say my best core is 3 and 4. And what will happen is, like if I'd run something like Signbench, I actually saw the load go to core 3, and then Signbench wanted it on core 1 or Windows, and I would see it shift, and then like it's like there was a delay before it figured out how to do which core the system wanted. Or I think it started with this disabled, it goes to core 1, and what happened was it went to core 1 when I first clicked start the test, and then it would shift to core 3. Like I saw the utilization jump up on core 1 and then move to core 3, and for me that's like latency. It doesn't seem perfect. So I just keep it all disabled now, and you can like look it up on Reddit. There's other people saying that they have more consistent performance with CPPC off completely. So that basically puts it to Core 1. So as long as your Core 1's not weak, you shouldn't have any issues, but yeah, I don't think it matters too much. They've probably fixed it, hopefully, but they don't mention it because the Agesa notes always suck. FCH, leave that alone. Leave that alone. Wait, did I normally have it on by default? I don't remember if I used XMP and then configured from XMP enabled or not. My fan curves, gotta remember to redo those. Here we go. Yeah, I had it on profile 1. So this isn't that important if you're setting all your timings yourself, but if you're using a profile, it can help with some of the automatic, when you go into advanced, there's some things that are just left on auto, and I'm guessing they have a higher likelihood on being on the right setting, or help with the training, rather than having it on default and then you're configuring everything manually, but there's a bunch of auto settings that are not running off XMP settings. So that's why I do that. And everything else, see here, auto, disabled, enabled. Memory retry 2, yeah, that's fine. And I'll go through to the voltages now, because I switched to offset. Like, it doesn't really matter which one you use. Like, leave all the LLC. If you're using PBO, leave that all on auto. And then I used offset for the, because I was trying to make sure the boost was working properly, because you do get clock stretching when you manually adjust voltages. And so I used offset mode because it's different to override. It won't lock the voltage, it lets it remain dynamic, and it didn't change anything, but I found out my ideal value to match what I was originally overriding with for the sock voltage. So 0.0625. 0.0625, and then VDDP was at 09, and then global was at 09 for 4 sticks on 3600 megahertz. And then DRAM voltage was 1.35. So I actually didn't even need to overvolt anything for the latencies I'm running, for the timings I'm running. And what should happen with the -29 curve is, this is what I want to see when I reboot after I save settings. I want to see 1.144, 1.042, and 1.364 is my stable voltages. So then I'll already know if there's an issue with the BIOS if I reboot and I see different voltages or much lower voltages, or it'll just fail to boot if there's a severe issue with how it's supplying voltage. So here we go. Command rate, this is where you set gear down mode for stability. It's kind of like command rate 1.5, best way to put it. So it's going to be hard. I'm holding the phone and also doing this. Okay, so I'm going off a screenshot here. So that's what I'm doing, if you're wondering. I have not memorized all this. I am not a pro RAM clocker or anything like that. 16, 19, 16, 21. 6. I'm just sharing this just for people that might be curious what goes into updating a BIOS and how much effort it might take. 350, 290. And there'll be some like really good tweakers that'll know that I'm probably setting some of these wrong, or I could tighten them a bit. Wait, what the heck? TWR, it's rounding by itself? I tried to set 12. 290, 12, 4, 12, there we go. 12, 4, 12, 6, 8, 8, 16, 16. Let's make sure that's right. And then I go further down. TCK was 1, I'm pretty sure. Default 6. Okay, and 4, 1, 5, 5, 4, 1, 7, 8, 3. Power down. Disabled. TSME. disabled. For 4 sticks, enable the normal bank group swap and then disable the bank group swap alternating. I think that it stands for alternating, like alternating sticks, and it's better with for dual channel 2 sticks than bank group swap alt is recommended. And both of these help with stability, and completely disabled is supposed to be the fastest, but I'm pretty sure stability takes priority for anyone's system, because who wants RAM instability issues? If you can stabilize it with a minimal latency hit, then that's good. I've always used DRAM latency enhanced, and I've found it helps with latency a little bit and doesn't seem to hurt anything, as long as all your other settings are good. Auto, and then there's a couple extra, like these weren't in there before, but I guess leaving them on auto would match. And then, where are we? RTX chain data, leave all that alone. And then, let's see. 53.3 is what I used. RTTWR, dynamic off, RTT nom, 3448. Auto, and then this was 2420, 2424. 2420. 24, and I'm pretty sure everything else was just on auto. Okay, so that should be good for the RAM. And lastly, what else am I forgetting anything? Lastly, the hardware monitor. Whoa, that's some weird. The heck is that? 20% at 0C, 20% at 20C, 65C, 75%, 70%, 100. I don't even know where to start with that. My actual curve is more like this, and I'll just fix it up now. 35, 55. Oh no, you gotta start at the top because it works its way down. Get that out of the way. So 60, 100. The Deepcool AK620 fans are really like uber quiet. So I found over the ceiling fan I normally have running above me, I can't even hear it on max. That's why I have it so aggressive. And I'm in a 32C ambient room. So, you know, that's why. It's not because I like to have noise or anything like that, but it's because I don't care about replacing fans in a couple of years' time. If they happen to fail early, I'd rather just have good temps in a high ambient room temperature. So these are basically set to ramp up as soon as I'm under any type of gaming load, even if it's a light gaming load. And then my idle is, what is that? 35C, 55%. And then 45C, 70%. Sorry, I said this one wrong. 45C, 70%. So it's like that. That's my CPU fan profile. And then system 1 I unplugged because these had a splitter and I just ran them off the same header. And then this fan, like to set the curve for, I'm pretty sure this is my top exhaust fan, which runs on DC voltage to get accurate RPM. So you can see 800 RPM, but to actually set the curve to match my rear fans, I just put it in PWM mode because it lets me set the percentages and the temperatures the way that I want, and then I switch it back to DC mode, and it's more accurate, the overall curve. So that way it is, let me see, 3560, 3560, 4570, 5580. I wish there was a copy option in here though. Like you could just copy it into another, have to do each fan header manually. And then 68, 100. That was in my goal was trying to keep the temp under 70 for Signbench, but it doesn't really matter. For gaming, it usually stays between this area, which is quiet with Arctic F12s. So, and then and with the Fantex top 140mm fan. So as you can see, I've set that there, and then I switch it back to DC because if I leave it on PWM, I get 19,000 RPM readings, which is just wrong. And then I set it back to and it does that. So it basically converts it for me from percentage to DC voltage. So I set it under PWM and then put it back to DC. So just sharing that for anyone that gets weird RPM readings and they want to set their fans and they don't know what voltage to use, just set it in PWM. And then the same, wait, this is the rear fan, which does work with PWM. These are the case fan, the intake fans. 3555. Sorry if this is tedious, guys. This is like, I'm only just sharing this just to show the BIOS setup and what kind of fan curves I run. 4570, 5580. If you're running like really cheap fans, they will be really loud if you try to copy this curve. So, you know, get some Arctic fans. And then, wait, was it really 6100? Oh, that's back on the CPU. I'm on the wrong one. 3560, sorry. 3560, that's because I want the intake and the exhausts working well, even at like after coming out of load and you go to idle. I want good airflow through the system. 5580 and then 68100. And I'll just make sure I set that right. 3560, 4570, 5580, and then 68100. So that's how I've set it. Okay, so that's all set. And now to actually make sure all that BIOS configuration work does not get ruined, definitely go to your overclocking profile tab and save it as whatever it is, like whatever your settings are. I did have a log, like I took a screenshot of my old BIOS profiles just so that I have that reference, because you can't, even though you can export them to a USB stick, you can't actually reuse them with a BIOS update. So you have to, the best way is to enter everything manually, but it's still good to keep a screenshot because then you can remember what you've tested. Like what kind of settings have you been running before, you know? And my actual setting is -29, the one that's highlighted, profile 4, and that's how I'll save it, to have an idea if I ever do any more tweaking, to have an idea of a reference to what I was actually doing, what are the important settings that I was tuning. So -29 and then +0 megahertz, and then the PBO limits, which are the main thing you tweak when you're adjusting PBO and you're working within a certain temperature range. So I save it like that. +0, I'm not overclocking the PBO or running it, you know, at 4.8 gig or anything like that, because unless I have an RTX 3090, it is unnecessary with the RX 6700 XT. I'm not CPU bound. I'm GPU bound for even when I run Radeon Super Resolution and all that. So I save that. That's all good. It's showing 2G1, you know, the BIOS version. I could even export it. If I go here, I can go OC profile save to USB. If for some reason, sometimes when you clear CMOS, it can actually wipe your save profiles. It normally doesn't, but I've had it happen where I've gone to clear CMOS. I've gone back into I couldn't reload my overclock profile because it wiped that too. So in that case, I'll also save it to my USB where I have the BIOS saved. And I'll go in there and find, you know, BIOS updates. And then I'll save it under the relevant BIOS. So if I ever want to flash back, I've also got profiles saved there that I don't actually have to redo it all for a previous BIOS. I can just reload that profile. So I'll save it under 1.2.0.7 and select current folder. And then name it, you know, -29 +0. Just try to have the same name because that makes it easier. And then 105. Why am I not using my number pad? 70, 110. Okay. So that's saved. And now we are going to see if this Agesa is fine, if there's any severe issues with it. So save changes and reboot. It'll show me all these changes I've done for all the fan profiles, all the voltages. It's actually a fair bit when you go through it all, how much configuration there was for a already tuned system. Casual tuning though, this is not like anything hardcore. Of course, there's people that could do way better than me, but just to give you guys that idea. So save changes and reboot. and now we're going to see if those voltages match up with what I had in Agesa 206C. Because then if I have any weird stability issues, I'll actually know why. Like, I'll actually have a baseline idea. Why would it be acting unstable under load? And it's because my BIOS, voltage changed or something like that. So if I go to my voltage screenshot, it'll take a minute for it to stabilize. But basically, I go into the OC tab and down here, and we see what the -29, because they have been messing with PBO voltages, right? They've been capping it, and they've been tweaking it slightly. I don't know, it's to help with stability, but I wish they'd just leave it alone in terms of the behavior, because people that have already tweaked know what the behavior does, and then once you change it in a BIOS, it screws with stability. And then there's people that were always having stability issues. It might help those people that need the little bit more voltage bump, but the people that tuned it down in voltage will actually get a detrimental effect, because it'll increase the PBO envelope, like you'll hit it sooner. So anyway, with the same, we're seeing 1.15, and with the previous BIOS, 1.144. And I actually sat at the BIOS before I took the screenshot just to see what it was doing. The SOC voltage also looks like the SOC voltage looks okay. It might be 0.002 higher. Sorry, I'll have to hold it in such a way you can see both. But I can already spot, apart from the DRAM's fine, everything else looks fine. But yeah, the CPU core voltage does not need to be at 1.15. I was stable at 1.144. But in saying that, this is PBO on a -29 curve, and if I offset this, it can actually throw off it can actually cause clock stretching, and it has weirder behavior compared to just using the curve optimizer. The curve optimizer can handle, going up and down, and then you find your stable curve optimizer. But I might just have to live with this. Like, it's not a big deal. It's about, 0.678, 0.5 or 6, 0.005 or 6 volts higher. Like, it's not a massive deal. Like 1.144 to 1.150. That's fine. It's not going to be unstable from that, but it might mess with the performance. It might even help to some degree. But I did try lowering my PBO all-core from -29 to -25 to -20, and all it did was hurt performance. It didn't actually improve anything. So that's why I never, I think there's just an issue with the way PBO single was working with the latest Windows build, or possibly background, so I can just exit out of that. Background processes that they've added into Windows, like Windows 11 has a fair bit of bloat. As much as they try to say it's more performs better and the gaming's fine, I still think it has bloat. So anyway, I can eject my little USB. We're back at the desktop. Just put my USB stick away. This is a long video, and 43 minutes. And now we're gonna run some CPU-Z, and I'll close what that auto startup MSI Afterburn is really the only thing that started up, and I'll close that so that there's nothing else, and we'll see what the scores are doing. Actually, we also want hardware. It's okay to have hardware info open. I've done Signbench with hardware info open and closed, and as long as your polling rate has not been set too low, like the default 2000 is fine. It's fine. I just want to see if it's boosting any better, like if I see a higher boost clock, because I've only seen the single core boost reaching the same boost as the all core, while on early Windows 11 and early BIOS Agesa updates, I was seeing the single hitting up to 4.8, while the all core was down at 4.645, like what it's supposed to hit. And I was seeing the single core hitting higher than the all core. That's the normal PBO, single versus all-core behavior that I was expecting, but lately I've only ever seen the single hitting the same 4.65, and that was with CPPC on, off, different configurations didn't make a difference. So we're going to bench, we'll try CPU-Z first, and I normally hit around 5,000 something. So that's about the same. I'm not seeing any difference there. It's showing the effective clock's hit up to 4.6. It's already done. So 5046. I did not sit at the desktop for that long though, and as you can see, the single's still down. 570, like that. Even the single on CPU-Z can hit higher, but I can't run the single again. It doesn't like, so yeah, it's showing me that I hit 4.65 on all cores, and the effective clocks were all hitting 4.65 basically, and the voltage peak was 1.212 with this -29 all core. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, it's cool, but no improvement on the single core performance, at least in CPU-Z. That's about the same as what I always get. 570, 572. And can I reference a 5600X in here? I'm not sure if CPU-Z added like 5600X. I know that the 5950X will destroy it. It hits like really high singles, 648. That's what I'm supposed to get, and that's what I was getting in Windows 10. So anyway, I think this Windows 11 just has some bloat that I can't find. I've disabled, like, I've stripped down a lot of the services and stuff. But anyway, and all the telemetry is disabled. So next we move on to, just because it's quicker, I'm not going to do Cinebench R23 because it's slow. It's actually about the same as long as you set it right. Like, you can disable the time duration, time testing. But we're just gonna see what happens here. Oh, and you can also set the, it defaults to lower priority. Don't set it to max because it can literally, well, not hang, but it's not nice to, if you're trying to watch metrics, if you set it too high, your metrics won't even update. And so that's why you don't want to set the priority to real time or to high. Just above normal or normal's fine, and they perform about the same. But I use above normal, because then my hardware info doesn't get delayed, because then it doesn't I don't even get accurate anything. So anyway, run selected test, and we'll see here what the voltages and stuff are doing. Try to focus this. I think my camera's dirty, like, seriously, what's going on here? So as you can see, it's not really clock stretching, 5 megahertz, you know, margin of error, whatever. You can have it throttling at 4650 and literally matching your discrete clock reading, but then you will get about 5 to 6C higher temps. And this is in a 32C ambient room. So yeah, 1.237 volts. We'll see what the score looks like though. But yeah, this is minimal clock stretching with the PBO limits as stated here. I actually have them set as well to show in hardware info. And you can just imagine, if I was in a 22C ambient room, this AK620 would be keeping the CPU about 10 degrees cooler. 32C to 22C. So we'd be down in this like mid 60s or lower, would be my guess. And that score was 4568 CB. So obviously you can get much higher if you add PBO boost, but this is a reasonable score, about 4568 or 4580. I could run it again at the end, but I also want to see the single. I'll just pause this video so you guys don't have to sit through the entire thing because it's so slow. Oops, wait, I will show some, this is what I was talking about. So all the load is on core 0, this is with CPPC off, and the highest I've seen on, it's showing on the discrete clock is 4650. It's not going up to 48 or 47 or anything like that. So I don't know, maybe it's just how the 5600X always performed and it's just being affected by something Windows 11 is doing in the background. It could be using L3 cache, because Windows 11 does have sporadic L3 cache scores when you try to do IDA 64. It's way lower and more sporadic than Windows 10. And many people can, you know, attest to that. So yeah, 4650, and that does not hit 600 points. Like all the reviews for 5600X and Cinebench R20 all say about 600 points, even some 620 points on stock PBO. And I guess they could be using motherboard limits, which is fully uncapped. That might help a tiny bit, because as you can see down here, we are throttling on EDC, but it does give considerably lower temperatures. Under the full load test, I would have been hitting 77-ish if I had it uncapped just for an extra 5 megahertz, and the score goes up by like 10 points, 10 to 20 points for uncapped, basically motherboard limit equivalent. But I do think I'm probably just getting some temperature throttling. Sorry, this is a thermal paste rag. I do still think it's boost throttling, not temperature throttling, but the boost algorithm is throttling once it gets around 70C. So I think that could also just be the issue. Or it could just be it's using L3 cache in some detrimental way to benchmark performance. Or it could just be my high ambient temp, 32C, and then which reaches 73C under full load. And even on a single core, if the average temperature, like the current temperature, is even 5 degrees higher, it affects the peak boost and the way and how well it holds the boost. So without going too technical, I'm fairly sure the boost algorithm performs better at lower temperatures, and it could just be my higher ambience. And even with an all-in-one cooler, I'll be limited by my ambient room temp. And so I'm in a tropical country, and I do remember on cold mornings around 27 degrees, running Signbench, I did remember getting better scores, but it was also under Windows 10 because it was a while back and the cold weather was, months and months ago. I can't change the weather to retest it in the same scenario without running the aircon, and the electricity here in Bohol has got pretty expensive, so I can't really do it just for testing sake. And I've kept the aircon decommissioned for now. So maybe when our budget improves, I might do some more low temperature testing and get the room temp like stabilized at 22C, and you'd see some really good AK620 temps in that scenario. So yeah, I'll just pause this and resume it so we can see the final score of single in Agesa 1.2.0.7. Okay, so that's just finishing up, and yeah, it's about the same. It's actually similar to the CPU-Z score. So 572. How does CPU-Z do it so quick? 572 single, and now it's going back to its sleep states, which you can't see. Idle, that's not even an accurate idle. You have to look in Ryzen Master. But I just wanted to share that, guys, just to show Agesa 1.2.0.7 seems to be running fine. Obviously, this is not stress testing heavily enough to prove the stability. And there was slightly higher BIOS voltage is the only real difference I noticed, but scores are about the same. Like I have a folder actually with Agesa testing. Where is it? 5600X, clock stretching limits, yeah. So Agesa 1.2.0.6c with the same settings, where is it? +0, I gotta look for the +0 testing. +0, 105.70, 110. And this is on Agesa 1.2.0.6c, 4577, 573. And the voltages were 1.119 was the screenshot voltage. I don't know what I was doing then. I think it was just after the benchmark's done. And 1.231 was the max voltage. So and then the temp was 71, but I think my ambient was 1 degree cooler there. So, it slightly affects the exhaust and the load temps. But anyway, just for that reference, if I can open the screenshot, did I actually close the screenshot? I suck. If I open the screenshot and half screen it so that we can see the voltages, and then I can compare that to the actual what we just got now. So I'm fairly sure the room was cooler by a couple degrees, like maybe it was a 30C ambient temp, and I'll just zoom that in. So this was Agesa 1.2.0.6c on the left, and on the right is 1.2.0.7, and it does look like the load voltage is also a little bit higher. So 1.237 with a -29 PBO, and the vid was asking 1.281. I don't know why the vid's changed. I guess it's the BIOS, but the Agesa, whatever. But as you can see here, running the same benchmark, which we've just finished, the minimum is slightly lower. I don't think that matters though, because that is just a discrete reading. It's not the Ryzen Master reading. But the main thing I'm looking at is the peak load voltage, which was 1.237 volts under the new BIOS, 1.2.0.7c, and then 1.231 volts under 1.2.0.6c. So yeah, it's actually matching. The idle in the BIOS, I was seeing about +5 or plus 0.005 to 6 volts increase, or MV, 5 to 6 MV increase. And then in under load, the peak voltage is also increased 6 MV. 0.006 is the increase from the load voltage. So as you can see, 1.231, 1.237 on the new Agesa. But in terms of the actual scores, I mean, you can look for yourself. I'll just put them back, drag them back over next to each other. So this was, wait, I'll try to get them right next to each other. So, and put the phone close. So yeah, Agesa 1.2.0.6c, and then 1.2.0.7, and a 1 point on the single that's negligible in a margin of error, and then the multi looks a little bit different, but I will run it a second time because it's quick, and we'll just make sure, because sometimes it goes up after the second run. Like it caches, I don't know what it does, but I've seen it happen where, and then the third and the consecutive runs after that will all be exactly the same. So we'll see if the multi is hurt at all. It is possible that a slight bump in the BIOS voltage will also hurt the envelope of the EDC limit, and in which scenario we will see a slight multi penalty, but it's margin, like, you know, it's such a small difference. It doesn't matter in real world. It's only visible in a benchmark. And if anything, it'll just help with stability. It might even be possible, actually, because of that bump, I might even be able to go to -30, because I actually was stable at the desktop on -30, just not under all loads. And because they've bumped this voltage, because my CPU binning seems to be okay for, you know, 1.231 under load, it's possible if I set it to -30, I might actually have some level of stability because they've increased the BIOS voltage from this early testing. So I will have to do that. I'll have to try setting it to -30 and see what happens, see if I can get, yeah. So it actually scored exactly the same the second run, so it was already accurate because I do have minimal background processes running. There's not really anything interfering with it. So from the look of it, this early analysis, with the slight voltage bump over the previous BIOS under load, I think there might be room to go to -29 because they've adjusted the, I don't know what they've done. They've adjusted the PBO curve, and I'm at the exact same settings. I'm getting even, like, actually that was a little bit different. The peak voltage under 1.244 is higher, and what that does is it increases the temperature slightly. So that could also be, like, my room temp isn't that dramatic of a change to have 3 degrees higher, 2 degrees higher, but the higher BIOS voltage hits the PBO limits quicker, and that's probably why I'm getting that lower performance on multi, like 10 points lower. And it's not a big deal, but I'm just curious now. If I set my minus curve to 29, would that just end up matching -30? Sorry, would that match the -29 on Agesa 1.2.0.6c, where I was getting slightly lower voltage? You know what I mean? So what I can do is, I know that in the BIOS, like, because this is accurate, this is like almost 1-to-1. Well, actually, it's a bigger difference now when I look at it after the second multi-run. I'm actually seeing a 1.244, and it's like almost 0.010, not 10, more than 10, 0.013 volts higher. So 1.231 versus 1.244. But I would go off the BIOS voltage. That would be the more accurate thing. So in the BIOS, I was getting 1.1, I think it was 1.144 at -29 in Agesa 1.2.0.6c. And then in this Agesa, in 1.2.0.7, I'm getting 1.15. So now that I've warmed up the system a little bit, I'll just make sure, because my system was running before the previous screenshots. So I'll see if it's giving me that same reading, or if it goes down because the VRM's warmed up and everything, and, you know, power delivery, it might have just, no, it's going, actually, it's stabilizing. It's actually going lower again. It's going down to 1, it's within 0.002 MV, 0.002 volts of the previous BIOS now that I've warmed the system up. So there's not really a purpose. I don't think it's actually worth it. If I set it to -30, I'll probably just be unstable again. It'll probably just crash, because I was getting the odd crash at -30, and then -29 is just rock solid. So I will just have to do some more load testing with 1.2.0.7 to confirm stability. I'll have to do some proper stress testing, ASUS RealBench, Thread Stepper, which is a new, similar to Core Cycler benchmark that released. You can find it on Reddit. Just look up Thread Stepper. I might do the full stability test in Thread Stepper, which takes around an hour. And then I'll get back on the 1.2.0.7 stability if it's still matching 1.2.0.6c stability. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. Just it's a bit different. Like, I'm out of the desktop for once, and I did the full recording to show you guys setting up the BIOS and how, you know, my XMP and everything carried over, and it wasn't that tedious. Like, I see a lot of horror stories. People update the BIOS. Maybe it happens on different motherboard brands. If your BIOS does not automatically reset to defaults when you update it, make sure you reset it to defaults and disable XMP before you run the BIOS update. So reset it to defaults, disable XMP, then update your BIOS, and then clear it to defaults again, and then set all your settings manually. Don't just try to reload settings from an older BIOS. But I'll even go into my Zen timings just to show, or actually I'll open IDA 64. Maybe 1.2.0.7 has some difference in IDA 64. Probably not, but I mean, it doesn't hurt to just have a look, because you can see the annoying performance of, you can see the annoying L3 cache performance and how inconsistent it can be with Windows 11. But we'll just see here. So this is my RAM here, 3600, 4 sticks, dual channel, and now it's dual rank because they're all single rank sticks. So for single rank is basically dual rank. So this is how this is Team Dark ZA really budget RAM. It's C18 3600, C18 2222 is the normal timings and speed. So yeah, 59NS. If I rerun that, I can, and I've got Afterburner's OSD actually hits a little bit. So I'll close that. I can get it. I've had it as low as 58, but that's only for multiple runs. It's not really a consistent 58. And 59 is like a worst. Like, I don't think it'll go up to 60 ever. But you can just see how inconsistent the Windows 11 L3. It's just weird. I feel it messes with stuff. Like, I don't know what Windows 11 is doing. So as you can see, on Windows 10, this will be 10.3, and I'm getting 11.6. And if I rerun it, it'll even change from 11.6, even though nothing is really running. It'll probably get down. The lowest I've seen is 11.4. From 10.3 in Windows 10. So yeah, 11.7. Something is like slightly hitting the cache, or it's something's either slightly hitting it, or it's sleeping, or Windows power saving. I don't know what it could be doing. So there we go, 11.3. That's actually the lowest I've ever seen it on Windows 11. And then if I rerun this, I'll probably get up to 500. And then if I rerun the latency for the RAM itself, so this top one's the memory, I might be able to get it under 59NS on the second run. 59.4. Now it's actually giving me the exact same rating. That could have even been from adding the second two sticks. It actually I had to change a couple of timings, so that could also be why. 59. So yeah, that's like a better score. But I think it'll just go back up if I run it over and over again. But yeah, the L3 cache is what bugs me with Windows. I don't know if it's just like they've released updates and the updates didn't do anything. So there we go. But our latency went down a little bit more, 58.9. But yeah, like I said, on a good day, 58 is like the lowest I've ever seen. But I didn't retest on 4 sticks. There might be like a 1NS penalty. But yeah, see here? If I just rerun this, you can see how inconsistent it is. 494, 483... 503, and it was 524 just a minute ago. 544, like why? Why? Do you think it's Windows 11? I'm pretty sure it is, because Windows 10 doesn't do this. See how stupid, like, inconsistent it is? But the L2 and everything is pretty fine. it actually goes up. That also went up by 30 gigabytes a second when I just reran the write on L2 cache. So sorry, I'm just using the word cache because it sounds like a more unique word. There's like, if you look at the spelling of cash for money and CACHE, pronunciation and the way it's spelled, cache is a unique word, which makes more sense. Even though I know the word is pronounced cache, you've got cache money and then there's computer cache. While cache would have been a unique pronunciation for a computer-specific term. So I don't know. That's why I sometimes say cache, because my brain just feels like that's the right way to say a computer-related unique term for memory, memory levels of storage. It's like L1, L2, L3, cache. There's no other word that cache could mean than cache. Like, it can only mean computer, you know, it's not a dual meaning pronunciation. Cache sounds like money. Like, the only thing in common is that they're both numbers. They both like are a reading of numbers, numerical. But cache is used for money already. So why would you use it again for, like, cache in itself means money. It doesn't mean storing something. So I don't know. Sorry, I need sleep or something. So yeah, just showing that there, and 1.2.0.7, and then I guess I'm gonna run the stability testing. So see is in the update. I'll probably just update it in the comments. Like, I'll take screenshots of the passes on ASUS Realbench and in Threadstepper. And, you know, if it passes, you'll see it pop up in the comments. If there's a serious issue, I will literally update this video with all caps warning people, don't go to 1.2.0.7 if there's some serious bug I find. But I haven't had long enough. This is just like freshly, I just saw someone share it on Reddit that it was freshly released on their Google Drive. And okay, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.